So good morning everyone. Good morning Chitralekha, good morning Mehul, Soumya. A very warm greetings of the day to you, all of you who have joined and who are about to join. Today we shall be discussing about a controversy that revolves around a statement from a chief minister of a southern state who said that we would probably need a new constitution for India. Having a new constitution is something which is very difficult, or rather impossible in the present scenario. And those are the things that have been vigorously discussed in this document that I have shared with you. This is one of the articles that was published in the Hindu, and this is written by one of the lawyers who practices at the Telangana High Court. He says that there are so many factors because of which drafting a new constitution is absolutely impossible. Okay. Now, having a new constitution for India is completely a political statement. Perhaps the minister would never have meant it, but these kinds of political statements that somehow they benefit the political parties in some way or the other. I don't know the intention, the context in which the statement was made, and nor I am interested in knowing anything about it. Yes, KCR, it was KCR. But the question is that if this new constitution is impossible, what are those factors? Just one political statement of a chief minister from a southern state has initiated a debate regarding the impossibility factors of drafting a new constitution. Those factors are important. When we are about to counter such political statements, howsoever political they may be, but still we should, all the factors regarding the constitutional history, regarding the political, socio-political circumstances that had existed at the time when the constitution was being drafted, the differences, the contrasting differences between the socio-political circumstances of that time and the socio-political circumstances of today. And the people who drafted the constitution are no more with us. These are some of the important factors. Now the question is that why I have chosen this topic for you, why I have chosen this article for you, because this article comes with a lot of information about constitution, about constitutional history, and about the constitutional challenges the present India faces. Okay, so that is why we say that drafting a new constitution is impossible. Now before I begin, and before we begin the discussion on why drafting a new constitution is impossible, I would perhaps like to dwell upon the fact that Constitution of India is the only of its kind document in the entire world. You might be knowing this, that this is the lengthiest and largest written constitution in the world, and it is the most versatile document that establishes the most deep-rooted political structure in any democracy. Okay, world's largest democracy in terms of liberalism and in terms of the freedom is that of the United States. But still, the United States does not have a constitution like ours. The wave of democracy had started from the United Kingdom and from Britain. But still, the Britain and the United Kingdom does not have a constitution like ours. The countries of the world, they are striving for having democracy, true democracy, and they are trying to draft a constitution for themselves which is perfect from all the angles. But still they don't have a constitution like ours. What is the reason? Because India is the only country of its kind in the entire world. The most diverse in terms of culture, in terms of food habits, in terms of dresses, in terms of dances, in terms of religious beliefs, in terms of religious practices, in terms of, so many things, in terms of tribes, in terms of languages. And when the Constituent Assembly was tasked with drafting a new constitution, the biggest challenge that came across almost every day before this Constituent Assembly was to, write this constitution with a truly holistic and inclusive approach. Truly a holistic and inclusive approach, because it was their responsibility to include almost every single person in, every single tribe, every single religion, every single linguistic minority, every single religious minority in this country. Right from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, and from Gujarat to Assam and Manipur and Nagaland in the northeast, every single state, every single tribe, every single cultural minorities, they were all included in the constitution. And that is why constitution became the largest written constitution in the world, and the most versatile one, the most dynamic one, which is rigid as well as flexible. Okay, so a constitution which has come, which came into being after so much of efforts and after so much of deep study and research. Do you think drafting a constitution like this is so easy? Is it possible? No, that is not possible. These things are not possible. These kinds of things, they happen only once. They happen only once. So drafting a new constitution is impossible. Now we are going to discuss these factors in detail. What are the factors which make it impossible to draft a new constitution for a country like India? It's not easy. When we read the sources of the constitution, we try to find out which feature of the constitution was taken from which constitution of the world. Okay, which constitution? Like, for example, we have borrowed this federal scheme from the Government of India Act. Okay, we have we have borrowed this, this concurrent list, the concept of concurrent list from the Australian Constitution. We have borrowed fundamental rights from United States. We have borrowed directive principles from Ireland. We have borrowed justice, the concept of justice, social, economic, and political justice as enshrined in the preamble to the Constitution of India from the United States, USSR. We have borrowed the concept of liberty, equality, fraternity from the French Constitution. Right? We have borrowed the concept of suspension of fundamental rights during national emergency from Germany. We have borrowed the concept of procedure established by law from Japan. There are so many sources. We have borrowed these features from different constitutions, and we have made up a constitution which is not like other constitutions in the world. This is the only kind of its constitution in the entire world. Do you think that the hard and the smart work that was poured in by the members of the Constituent Assembly, is it possible and is it easy for the people of today's India to put in the same level of hard work and smart work and draft a new constitution? Obviously not. So now let's begin with drafting a new constitution is impossible. Members of the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly of India. Now since this was taken from the newspaper, so the caption of the photograph has also come with it. There was a photograph also. Okay. Now recently the Chief Minister of Telangana said India needs a new constitution, as according to him, governments at the center over the years have been suppressing the powers of the states. Now, do you feel that the central government, especially since 2014, have been suppressing the powers of the state governments? Do you think that way? Do you think that way, that governments at the center over the years have been suppressing the powers of the state? We are a quasi federal state. We have a quasi federal we are a quasi federal state. We have a quasi federal constitution. We are not completely federal. There are circumstances where the powers of the state governments are usurped by the central government, like during national emergency or during state emergency, or when the Rajya Sabha with the majority passes a resolution to empowering the parliament to make a law on any state subject, or when two or more states they make a request to the central government to make a law on any state subject for them. Now these are circumstances. Or for example, if something in the state subject requires international importance, and it becomes very pertinent for the government then to legislate upon that state subject. These are some of the circumstances in which the central government has an edge over the state governments. Okay. Now, Chitralekha says, yes, sir, they are aiming for UCC. Yes, exactly. And you have also read about the MCD, Municipal Corporation of Delhi. Perhaps before the last week, we discussed about how the central government is trying to take over the powers of the state governments, like in Delhi. I mean, the elected government in Delhi has to consult the lieutenant governor every now and then for almost every minutest work it wants to do. Yes, Pagudi, you're absolutely right. Center has always tried to have supremacy on state subjects. There is some of the supremacy which is already granted by the constitution. But if the center is striving to attain and take control of the state subjects beyond what has been given to it by the constitution, then it becomes dangerous. It becomes dangerous, isn't it? The state governments are empowered in their fields, okay, in their own jurisdictions. Now what happened, if you remember that the move of the center to reduce and diminish or degrade the powers of the elected government of NCT of Delhi and making it subject to consultation with the lieutenant governor for every trivial decision is something like suppressing the powers of the state, right? Then also we have come across an amendment of Municipal Corporation of Delhi, where the North Delhi Municipal Corporation, East Delhi Municipal Corporation and South Delhi Municipal Corporation have all been merged together into one, bringing it directly under the control of the central government. We read this in the previous days. Yes. Then we can say that we have also come across the Criminal Procedure Identification Bill. We have already read that. Criminal Procedure Identification Bill. Now this Criminal Procedure Identification Bill has already given some of the powers to maintain the records of the prisoners to the National Crime Records Bureau, avoiding the police and the public authorities at the state level to maintain any records. That's how minutely and that's how discreetly and tacitly and disguisedly the central government is trying to suppress the powers of the states. Okay. And what is the most problematic provision in the constitution? The most problematic provision in the constitution is that the governors in the states are the representatives of the union government. And it becomes easier for the central government that once the governor writes to the president of India that the constitutional machinery of the state is not being carried out in accordance with the constitution, and once the president is satisfied, the president is then empowered to impose state emergency under Article 356 of the Constitution of India, thereby toppling the state government, this elected government of the state. This has happened on many occasions, and that's how the centers are trying to misuse their powers under the constitution. Okay, now there are comments. They brought GST and took away states' discretion. Exactly. Very good observation, Chitralega. They said they looked at uniformity of tax laws. Some states don't have a GST councils yet. Exactly. That's right. Absolutely right. Even some of the states had not even consented to the GST bill and it was passed. Okay. They scrapped this 5-year plans and brought Niti Aayog. You know what was the composition, how the 5-year plans were drafted, how the planning commission used to work? Planning commission involved the participation of all the chief ministers of all the states in India. All the 5-year plans were drafted after complete participation from the state governments. But now what? There's no such provision. Such participations from the state governments have been discontinued. Yes, Chitralega. Then again she says that even they tried to take away judiciary's independence with NJAC. You know, this has been happening over the years, that they have been suppressing the powers of the states. Being a citizen and a constitutional head of state, he was not wrong in exercising his fundamental right to express his views freely. Nor was what he said wrong. Central governments have indeed been suppressing the powers of the states in various ways. The Supreme Court in judgments such as S.R. Bomai versus Union of India 1994 and Government of NCT of Delhi versus Union of India 2018 has castigated governments at the center for this. Okay, but the question is, can the people of India give themselves a new constitution? What is the solution? If the central government is trying to suppress the powers of the states over the years, then what do you think? Is that the solution? Drafting a new constitution? The solution lies in drafting a new constitution? Obviously not. Noted jurist Fali S. Nariman, in a lecture titled "The Silences in Our Constitutional Law," delivered in 2005, rightly said, "We will never be able to piece together a new constitution in the present day and age, even if we tried, because innovative ideas, however brilliant, howsoever beautifully expressed in consultation papers and reports of commissions, cannot give us a better constitution. In constitution making, there are other forces that cannot and must never be ignored. The spirit of persuasion, of accommodation, and of tolerance. All three are at a very low ebb today. We can add a few more forces which cannot be ignored today, such as casteism, nepotism, and corruption. Now tell me, have you understood what noted jurist Fali S. Nariman said in the lecture titled "The Silences in Our Constitutional Law" in 2005? He said that it's not possible to piece together a new constitution like this in the present day and age, even if we are trying hard to do that. Because innovative ideas, we have a lot of innovative ideas and they are brilliant. And they are beautifully expressed in consultation papers and reports of the commissions today. But still, despite all these things, we cannot give us a better constitution. In constitution making, there are other forces that cannot and must never be ignored. There are other forces that cannot and must never be ignored. The spirit of persuasion, and of accommodation and of tolerance. Do you think we can find the same spirit of persuasion today? We can find the same spirit of accommodation today and tolerance today? Obviously not. We cannot. We cannot find this spirit of persuasion, of accommodation and tolerance today. We don't want to pursue others. We don't want to talk to each other. We have simply been taught to hate each other. Hate is the hate is the cheapest thing in the market today. We don't want to pursue the other person. We simply want to hate him. We don't want to accommodate from people from different backgrounds, from different religions. We don't tolerate people practicing their religion. If their religion is different from ours, we don't tolerate them. Everything has become subject to the commodity of hate. And that is where lies the most unfortunate destiny of this country. So, that is what noted jurist Falius Nariman had said, that in constitution making, you can not only the brilliant ideas, not only the beautifully expressed political structures and political ideas that are beautifully expressed in the consultation papers and reports of commissions, these are not the only things that make up the constitution. What makes a constitution the best document is the spirit of persuasion. Constituent Assembly members, they had a good idea. They had so many brilliant ideas. Even people today have brilliant ideas. There is no surprise if the Constituent Assembly members had brilliant ideas with them. Perhaps we can have better ideas with them, but they were good human beings. They had the spirit of persuasion. They had the spirit of accommodation. They had religious tolerance in them. And that is why they could write such a good constitution for India. And today, these spirit of persuasion and accommodation and religious tolerance are at a very low ebb today. We can add a few more forces which cannot be ignored today. We have casteism today, we have nepotism today, we have corruption today. But when the Constituent Assembly was elected in August 1946, it was a time when every single person of this country saw himself as an Indian. Okay. However, there was some unfortunate time for India when India was partitioned in 1947. But after that, there was a spirit of unity. People recognized themselves as Indians. Okay? And that spirit of persuasion and accommodation and religious tolerance, it prompted the Constituent Assembly members to make such a good constitution. Okay? We can add a few people then, they hardly believed in casteism. There was no nepotism. There was no corruption. Okay, there was no corruption. Now, nation first. This article highlights a few events that took place while India's constitution was drafted to argue how these events may never take place in the present scenario. The first is the appointment of BR Ambedkar as chairman of the drafting committee. Granville Austin, in his book The Indian Constitution, Cornerstone of a Nation, wrote that Ambedkar was originally elected to the assembly as a member from Bengal, but lost his seat during partition. He was subsequently elected from the Bombay presidency at the behest of the Congress High Command. This shows that the biggest party then had an accommodative spirit, which seems lacking today. Ambedkar was fighting to ensure rights for the repressed classes. And in his own words, he came to the assembly to safeguard the interest of the scheduled caste. But he was trusted for his passion and talent and elected chairman of the drafting committee by the Constituent Assembly, which was dominated by the Congress. The result is the constitution we see today, which safeguards the rights of majority and minority communities. Today, when caste and nepotism play a pivotal role in electing even a ward member, consensus over a new constitution would be impossible. This has been such beautifully explained by the author. He says that this article highlights a few events while India's constitution was drafted, and argues that these kinds of events, they cannot be revisited. They cannot take place in the present scenario. The first is the appointment of BR Ambedkar as the chairman of the drafting committee. Can you imagine that a person who identified himself with the Dalits of the country as a scheduled caste, he was appointed as the chairman of the drafting committee? His caste identity was kept at bay, was kept aside, and his eligibility was judged on the touchstone of just a second, I have to take this call and I'll
Hello. Hello. Yes. Yes. Yeah, sure, sir. Yes, sir. 12:30 is fine, sir. Thank you. So, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Hello. I'm really sorry I had to take this call. Things are very disturbing these days. So, hello. Are you able to hear me now? Hello students, are you there?
Yeah, sure, sir. Yes, sir. 12:30 is fine, sir.
Okay. So this article highlights a few events that took place while India's constitution was drafted to argue how these events may never take place in the present scenario. The first is the appointment of BR Ambedkar as chairman of the drafting committee. So can you imagine that a person like Dr. BR Ambedkar was made the chairman of the drafting committee? Because we can see that person today. If he had he existed today in the present India, he perhaps would have been seen through the prism of caste. and perhaps not through the prism of being the most knowledgeable person in terms of constitution, but at that time his eligibility, his ability was judged on the touchstone of his knowledge and competency. His credentials was judged solely on the basis of what he can do for this country, for this nation. He's a person just like us. So Granville Austin, you must have heard of Austin a lot of, isn't it? He has written a book, Granville Austin. In his book, The Indian Constitution, Cornerstone of a Nation, wrote that Ambedkar was originally elected to the assembly as a member from Bengal, but lost his seat during partition. Okay, Ambedkar was originally elected to the assembly as a member from Bengal, but lost his seat during partition. He lost his seat during partition. He was subsequently elected from the Bombay presidency at the behest of the Congress High Command. This shows that the biggest party then had an accommodative spirit, which seems lacking today. Isn't it? What happened? That he was subsequently elected from the Bombay presidency. First, he was eventually in 1946, initially in 1946 when the Constituent Assembly's elections were held in July-August 1946. So at that time, Dr. BR Ambedkar was elected from Bombay, but subsequently he lost his seat during partition. Then he was elected from the Bombay presidency at the behest of the Congress High Command. You know, this shows that the biggest party, the biggest political party had an accommodative spirit. The Indian National Congress was trying hard to have BR Ambedkar on board. But this seems lacking today. Can you imagine, do we have the same Indian National Congress as it was in those days? Do we have the same Indian National Congress? What do you think? Do we have the same Indian National Congress? Do we have the same Indian National Congress as it existed earlier in those days? No. The people are joining Congress today and they are just leaving the same party the very next day. Because people in the Congress, they have started realizing that there is no accommodative spirit left in this party. The Congress today is not trying to connect with the people. Okay, then this seems lacking today. Everybody can see that. Ambedkar was fighting to ensure rights for the repressed classes. And in his own words, he came to the assembly to safeguard the interest of the scheduled caste. But he was trusted for his passion and talent and elected chairman of the drafting committee by the Constituent Assembly, which was dominated by the Congress. The result is the constitution we see today, which safeguards the rights of majority and minority communities. Today, when caste and nepotism play a pivotal role in electing even a ward member, consensus over a new constitution would be impossible. Isn't it? Then the assembly was pondering upon to safeguard the interest of the scheduled caste. Okay. But Ambedkar was trusted for his passion and talent, and he was elected as the chairman of the drafting committee by the Constituent Assembly, which was dominated by the Congress. And what is the result? The result is what we see today. We have the lengthiest written constitution in the world and one of the best constitutions in the world, which safeguards the rights of majority and minority communities. Today, when caste and nepotism play a pivotal role in electing even a ward member, even if we are electing a ward member from the wards, do you know what is a ward member? The corporator we elect, जो म्युनिसिपैलिटी के इलेक्शंस होते हैं, हम उसमें भी एक वार्ड मेंबर इलेक्ट करते हैं, तो we see his caste. and we look at him through the prism of nepotism. जो हमारा जानने वाला होगा, जो हमारा रिश्तेदार होगा, हम उसको वोट देंगे. We chose our relatives, we chose our blood relations, we chose our friends over the interest of the nation, over the interest of our own locality. We don't think who is going to be the best person for our locality, for our vicinity, who is going to actually work for it, who is the most honest one out of them. We don't see. Caste and nepotism still play a pivotal role in electing even a ward member. Now, how do you think in a situation like this, we can build a consensus over having a new constitution? Obviously not. We cannot have it. It took 2 years, 11 months and 18 days to draft the present constitution. And during this period, the members read the constitutions of other nations, consulted constitutional experts, drafted the constitution, debated it, redrafted it, and approved it. It took 2 years. Now, first you understand the chronology of the events. First, what happened? That who suggested the idea of having a Constituent Assembly for India? Who suggested the idea of having a Constituent Assembly to draft a constitution for India? Do you know this? Do you know this? Who suggested the idea of... Okay, you don't know. M.N. Roy, the pioneer of communist movement in India. M.N. Roy, R-O-Y. M.N. Roy was the person who suggested the idea of having a Constituent Assembly to draft a constitution for India. M.N. Roy was the pioneer of communist movement in India. Okay. It was in 1935 when he made this. Not B.N. Rao, Pankudi. No. B.N. Rao became the constitutional advisor to the Constituent Assembly. It was not B.N. Rao. It was M.N. Roy. Do you want me to comment? I am commenting this through my mobile phone. I am commenting his name. M.N. Roy. Okay. B.N. Rao was the constitutional advisor who was elected as the constitutional advisor to the Constituent Assembly. He was not the same person. M.N. Roy. Look at, I have commented. M.N. Roy was the pioneer of communist movement in India, and he in 1935 suggested the idea of having a Constituent Assembly for India that would draft the constitution for this country. Then in 1938, Jawaharlal Nehru, on behalf, perhaps in 1938, the Indian National Congress officially demanded the framing of the Constituent Assembly from the British government to draft a constitution for this nation. And this offer was accepted by the British government in August 1940, which is popularly known as the August Offer of 1940, if you remember. August Offer of 1940. Okay. Then in 1942, Sir Stafford Cripps was sent to India from London, and he brought the draft policy on having a Constituent Assembly for India. But this was not accepted by Muslim League led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, because he wanted 2 Constituent Assemblies. He said that you just go back, we won't accept it, because it was, quite vociferously revolted by Muhammad Ali Jinnah and the Stafford Cripps was sent back. So the Cripps mission had completely failed in 1942. Are you getting my point? Then he said that you should come with the draft policy for having two constituent assemblies, one for India and the other for the state of Pakistan, not one. Then in 1946, finally, the cabinet mission plan came, which was more or less accepted by Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And then in 1946, elections were held in July-August period of 1946 for the Constituent Assembly, and Constituent Assembly was elected. Okay, and then Constituent Assembly held its first meeting on 9th December 1946, and following the French practice, Dr. Sachidanand Sinha, being the oldest member of the Constituent Assembly, was made the president of the Constituent Assembly, temporary president of the Constituent Assembly. And then on 9th December, when elections were held under the presidentship of Dr. Sachidanand Sinha, then on 11th December 1946, just after two days, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the president of the Constituent Assembly. B.N. Rao was elected as the constitutional advisor of the Constituent Assembly. Okay, that's how the things took place. Now, from 9th December 1946 up to 26th November 1949, you can calculate the whole period. It's 2 years, 11 months, 18 days to draft the present constitution. Even if there are 10 representatives, Chitralekha says, to bring up each state's interest, we would have nearly 300 people in the Constituent Assembly alone. Who is an impartial person to preside, chair and debate the issues? Exactly. These are the practical factors. Now, during this period, you can calculate the whole period from 9th December 1946 up to 26th November 1949. And we come to know about the date of the enforcement of the constitution, date of adoption of the constitution while we read the preamble. Okay. What does the preamble says? We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and unity and integrity of the nation. On this 26th day of November 1949, we do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves this constitution. Now, this 26th day of November 1949 is the date of adoption, and that's why we celebrate it as the National Constitution Day every year, because the constitution was adopted. Okay. So, during this period, the members read the constitutions. The members read the constitution of other nations, because they read the French constitution, German constitution, Australian constitution, Japanese constitution, American constitution, Government of India Act 1935, British constitution. They read Irish constitution. I mean, so many things. During this period, the members read the constitution of other nations. They consulted constitutional experts. They drafted the constitution. They debated it. They redrafted it and approved it. Do you think the kinds of efforts that were poured in by these members of the Constituent Assembly, is it possible to do this in the present scenario? Do we have people of such a stature today? Obviously not. During Constituent Assembly debates, if 5 minutes were wasted one day, the House would assemble 5 minutes earlier the next day and sit until the night to complete pending work. How hard working they were, just think. अगर 5 मिनट भी वेस्ट हो जाते थे, तो they used to compensate it the very next day. And they used to sit until night to complete the pending work. This showed value for time and value for work done for the nation. Now all we see is ruckus and noise in parliament, with little debate or discussion taking place on bills. During Constituent Assembly debates, dissenters and hardcore critics were tolerated, and their suggestions, if found apt, were accommodated. If the suggestions were not found apt, there would be a healthy debate. Now bills are passed without allowing opposition members to express their views completely, let alone accommodating their suggestions. That's what happens today. Can you understand? Are you able to, are you able to draw a contrast between that scenario, people of that scenario, and the people of today? We have in parliament, the parliamentarians of today. What do they do? Are you able to decipher the contrast between the two? It's very easy. Third, the members of the Constituent Assembly emerged from the clutches of colonial rule. They knew the sufferings that they and the nation had undergone under foreign rule, and were determined to frame a constitution and spelled out fundamental rights which allow every individual a right to live their life with liberty and dignity and challenge the state's arbitrary decisions before an independent judiciary. Today's leaders seem to lack that spirit. Members of the Constituent Assembly chose the nation first. Today's leaders tend to choose their party first. What is the third factor? The third factor is that the members of the Constituent Assembly, they emerged from the clutches of colonial rule. They had realized the importance of having a nation. They had suffered and they had undergone such pains and struggles under foreign rule, and they were determined to frame a constitution. They spelled out fundamental rights, and they realized the importance of liberty. They realized the importance of freedom. We just talk. We don't realize the importance of freedom, but they realized it with liberty and dignity, and challenged the state's arbitrary decisions before an independent judiciary. Today's leaders seem to lack that spirit. Members of the Constituent Assembly chose the nation first. Today's leaders tend to choose their party first. Isn't it? Fourth, the Constitution states that India is a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. It protects the rights of every section of society. On the other hand, today's leaders give priority to particular ideologies and castes. Given this, drafting a new constitution will be a chaotic exercise and will shut the voices of some sections, especially the vulnerable. The constitution states that India is a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. It protects the rights of every section of society. On the other hand, today's leaders give priority to particular ideologies and castes. Today's leaders, what do? They don't talk about sovereignty. They don't talk about socialism. They don't talk about secularism. They don't talk about democracy and being republic. They don't take pride in these things. They take pride in their own ideologies and caste. We belong to this caste and we have this ideology. Given this, drafting a new constitution will be a very chaotic exercise and will shut the voices of some sections, especially the vulnerable. Okay. Now, fifth and most importantly, an unelected body was trusted by the constitution framers to declare the law. Okay? Most importantly, an unelected body was trusted by the constitution framers to declare the law. The purpose behind choosing an unelected body was that, by its nature of being not answerable to anyone except the constitution, the judiciary can adjudicate disputes in an independent, free, fair, and impartial manner. Okay? The unelected body was trusted by the constitution framers to declare the law. The purpose behind choosing an unelected body was that, by its nature of being not answerable to anyone except the constitution, the judiciary can adjudicate disputes in an independent, free, fair, and impartial manner. Today, leaders may choose to become judges as well as rulers. For instance, through the Constitution 32nd Amendment Act 1973, a proviso to clause 5 of Article 371D was inserted, which gave power to the Andhra Pradesh government to modify or annul any order passed by the administrative tribunal constituted to deal with service matters in which the government is a party. Okay, now Chitralekha says we had an MP from joint Andhra Pradesh who used pepper spray in the parliament on the day Andhra and Telangana bifurcation bill was voted to stop it from getting passed. Can these are the hard realities of today. Can we imagine such thing with the members of the constitution? We cannot even imagine. Okay. And clause 5, just read this, that in 1973 clause 5 of article 371D into 371D was inserted, which gave power to Andhra Pradesh government to modify or annul any order passed by the administrative tribunal constituted to deal with service matters in which the government is a party. Now, Andhra Pradesh government was given this undue power to annul any order given by any award given by the administrative tribunal. Now, this tribunal replaced the High Court. When the government is party to the litigation and when the tribunal is exercising the powers of the High Court, how can the government be given power to override the decisions of the tribunal? Fortunately, the Supreme Court declared this proviso as unconstitutional in P. Sambamurthy versus the state of Andhra Pradesh. Okay, now there are other such examples. What are they? A strong center. Before independence, India comprised over 550 princely states. You must be knowing what is a princely states. Those who were independent in their own spheres, in their own territories, but they had to accept the suzerainty of the British government. Okay. Now, before independence, India comprised over 550 princely states. Suffered from the problems created by partition and faced a looming economic crisis. Thus, the Constituent Assembly members tilted towards a strong center with a blend of cooperative federalism. It is true that the governments at the center abuse their powers to cripple opposition-ruled states, but that does not call for creating a new constitution. It calls for seeking mandate from the people to elect regional parties in general elections so that states can have dominance in the union, besides approaching the Supreme Court under Article 131 whenever the need arises to resolve conflicts between the center and the state. Okay. Now, Chitralekha says, God knows what sprays the members of today's Constituent Assembly would do to get the interest protected. Exactly. And it's not going to be a pepper spray, perhaps the red chili spray. Because they are full of hatred with each other. They hate each other so much. They can stoop to any lows. So it is true that the governments at the center abuse their powers to cripple opposition-ruled states. But that does not call for creating a new constitution. It calls for seeking mandate from the people to elect regional parties in general elections so that states can have dominance in the union, besides approaching the Supreme Court under Article 131 whenever the need arises to resolve conflicts between the center and the states. The Chief Minister should remember that if he could become the Chief Minister of Telangana, it is only because of the present constitution, as despite the Assembly of United Andhra Pradesh rejecting the resolution in 2013. To bifurcate Andhra Pradesh, it was Parliament which, by exercising powers conferred under Article 3 of the Constitution, carved out 2 states. Okay. Recently, the Chief Minister of Telangana said India needs a new constitution, as according to him, governments at the center over the years have been suppressing the powers of the states. Okay. Now this is the gist which is written here. Now, if you have any question, if you have anything to add, please go ahead. You're most welcome to do that. Okay, no questions. Are you sure, all of you? Understood everything. Okay, then I am signing off and we shall meet tomorrow with another topic. Okay? Till then, bye bye. Thank you.